learning about biology as a college student, I think what fascinated me the most was these highly cooperative animals. So the bees, there's the one queen, she has all her workers, and they're all working together as one big superorganism. They're all committed to that colony beyond anything else. So that's really what got me into it, was just trying to understand the basic way that they function. How is this big society organized? So I took a sabbatical about 6 years ago. I have connections to Argentina and South America, and so I wanted to go there, and I was searching around for a species that I could work on. And I ended up landing on the story of the giant Patagonian bumblebee. And so the giant Patagonian bumblebee is the largest bumblebee species in the world. So the queens of the species are about 4 centimeters long. They're bright orange, and they are this absolutely gorgeous, fascinating social insect, but they are almost extinct. And so I called up some wonderful collaborators, now collaborators in Argentina, and said, how can I help? I want to help save this species. So I spent a year in Patagonia searching far and wide for the Patagonian bumblebee. I found some. It was hard. It took many, many days and weeks to find them. And so we ended up doing some sequencing on the genome of the species. So this is the first data anyone's ever gotten on the species. And maybe someday it will be extinct, but now we have a record of that species. And so that really got me into conservation. What can we do as scientists with the tools that we have to try to help populations of declining species? And it's so timely. So it needs to be done now or never.
We have a team of graduate students that has been looking across the state of Iowa. We visited about 70 different sites, and we're looking for rare and endangered bumblebees.
We're here at Brushy Creek State Park looking for the rusty patch bumblebee. It's the first endangered bee in Iowa and in North America. What we hope to do is collect some health metrics from them.
When we find them at a particular site, we'll put the bee on ice while the bee is asleep, because they've entered what we call chill coma. We can then take body measurements and photographs of the bee, allowing us to collect data without harming the bee, and then we release the bee unharmed afterwards.
We're looking at different sites within different landscapes to see maybe in agriculture, are they doing better, are they doing worse? Compare that to somewhere where there's prairie habitat. So it's a way of comparing bees across the different landscapes in Iowa.
One of the things that we've identified as a critical stage in the colony development is actually the queen. So the queen in bumblebees is alone for a long period of her life. She spends winter basically in a state of diapause, which is kind of like hibernation. In the spring, she emerges and has to start a colony all by herself. She's a single mom, and most of them don't make it.
If a bumblebee queen fails to establish a colony during this really critical time, there aren't going to be any. It's that simple.
So we focused in on queens and their founding of colonies as a critical stage. The chambers are great because they allow us to rear bumblebees in a way that we can get the entire colony cycle. They're seasonal organisms, and so, we can simulate summer conditions, we can simulate winter conditions if we need to. The other really cool thing that we can do is program them to simulate stress in the environment. One of the experiments that we've run has actually simulated climate change and then looked at how bumblebee colonies are able to cope with elevated temperatures during their colony development. So we can actually program the chambers to simulate what life is like underground. Most of these nests are occurring underground in the wild. And then we can raise that temperature and see what happens to the health of those bumblebees, and then also how they're coping with that in terms of their behavior and their physiology. One of the lofty goals of a lot of conservation research is really trying to bolster populations of endangered or threatened species through captive rearing, breeding, and release or reintroduction in the wild. It's something that's on the list for the rusty patch bumblebee. For the recovery plan for that endangered species is captive rearing. If we can bring them in the laboratory and then successfully rear large numbers of them, that could be used for reintroduction efforts in the wild, and that could help improve populations of these endangered species. And so I think everything that we do could contribute to those kinds of efforts in the future.